Good evening, welcome to episode 6 of In at the Side. I'm Dom Hardman. I'm joined by now non-guest host JK, more a regular, and our guest this evening, Premiership referee Karl Dickson. How are you this evening, Karl?
I'm very well, thank you. Thoroughly enjoying lockdown at the moment, so look forward to something a little bit different tonight.
Yeah, what you been fun of your days with? You've been working out quite a lot on the old social media.
Well, just trying to keep myself busy, structure the day, training morning and afternoon, little bit of admin work during the day, and then I'm very fortunate to spend a bit of time with my kids as well. So trying to get a little bit of structure, but it's not a lot you can do when you with these current rules.
Yeah, exactly. I'm usually rolling out of bed about lunchtime at the moment, so I probably need to up the activity.
Some of us
in the next week. So obviously, Premiership postponed for now. They have made it clear that they do intend to finish it. Do you see that happening? If so, how would you see that happening?
At the moment, we have no idea what's going on. Obviously, with our deadlines and rugby in the worldwide sort of situation is just waiting to see what happens with this virus. Obviously, it's postponed many sporting events, not just rugby. So we're just kind of waiting to see what happens with government rulings and stuff around the world. And when it comes to the Premiership, obviously it wants to be concluded, but whether that's going to happen, I guess only time will tell. And you probably know as much as I do until the governments decide what they're going to do. Then obviously the plans can be put in place to see what's going to happen going forward. Whether that's the season starts in September, whether we can get something done before, or it's not till next year. And until we find out what's going on, no one really knows.
Obviously, they want to conclude the Premiership, and obviously they have got a plan in place to say the end date is going to be this. It's still going to have a knock-on effect, given obviously the rules with the RFU is you have to have a certain amount of time off. If you start training again, you have to have that time. So obviously it's going to have a knock-on effect regardless.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a normal sort of playing contract now, it's moved to you have to have 5 weeks off a year, mandatory. And obviously before you actually even play any of the games, teams are going to want to warm up and get back into a sort of mini pre-season, probably for 3 or 4 weeks to get guys back into the playing shape. So again, it's a difficult situation because obviously we want to finish the season with finding out who wins the league, who goes into to Europe essentially next year. We're lucky enough to know who's going to be relegated, but again, timescales have been put forward, but they can all change, and no one really knows what's going to happen until, as I said, reiterate, until the government decides what's going to go on going forward. So, we've seen what's happened in China. They've started to, release the lockdown a little bit and kind of slowly get back to normal. But whether that happens in the UK and Europe, when that happens, then we'll know. And, it affects not just the Premiership, the tournaments around the world.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, Championship's been concluded. Having played in the Championship yourself, obviously with Bedford, and then coming to the Premiership with Quins, how important is the last sort of push of the season? Do you think it was right to call it time on the Championship, or do you think they should have gone with the same line as the Premiership and looked to conclude that also?
I think that with the Championship, it's obviously slightly different because you don't have a playoff system. You're not playing to try and get into Europe or anything like that. Yeah. You have a promotion and a relegation. Now, people could argue, as obviously Ealing did, that, they're still mathematically they could have caught Newcastle. Whether that would have happened, we don't know. And obviously relegation, Yorkshire, Carnegie getting relegated. Again,
Leeds.
Leeds. I apologise. Whether that, obviously, they say mathematically they weren't down, but again, it comes down to they've made a decision, and that's the decision going forward. I think for the teams in the middle, it doesn't really sort of affect them too much in regards to league table. I think it's more financially going forward where it affects them.
Yeah, with obviously Ealing's saying they mathematically could have caught Newcastle. Obviously, it probably wouldn't have happened, but would it have been something that was probably not financially viable for them to be pushing up towards the Premiership anyway? Do you think they were ready for that push?
I mean, whether they're ready or not, I mean, if they win the league, then they have every right to go up to the Premiership, and I guess that's for the club and the CEO and the guy who owns it to make a decision where if they can financially viable up in the Premiership, could they accumulate the right players to try and keep them up there? So again, at that time, you want, if you win the league, you have every right, but then it comes down to I think we've seen in the past where teams have been up there and already said if they were going to win the league, they'd refuse to go up. And I think at one point Bedford said that when I was there. They were like, if we ever did become first, we'd refuse to go up because it's not viable financially to go up.
Yeah.
It's good. So obviously there's obviously a huge playing step up to the Premiership. Refereeing wise, obviously I imagine you've refereed at all levels, but what really sets this Premiership apart when it comes to the refereeing side of the game?
I think as you go up through the levels, it comes down to when you're in the sort of lower levels, you're more managing the game, because obviously it's a bit of a slower game. It's probably a little bit more unstructured. You're trying to figure out like how the teams are going to play so you can manage it, because ultimately you don't want to blow the whistle all the time in these levels, because you want teams to play, especially with kids rugby and stuff like that. But you want to play the game without affecting it yourself, but also letting everybody enjoy themselves at the same time. I think as you go up the leagues, the game becomes more structured and the tempo of the game increases. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is the tempo of the game. You have less time to think about things. And ultimately, players at the highest level, they know exactly what they're doing. They know how they're trying to achieve. They know how they're trying to do it. You're there refereeing the game to make sure you facilitate the game to the way it should be. But ultimately, players can play the game to where you don't even have to do too much. But if I'd say the two biggest things was the tempo of the game is so much quicker, and you have less time to make these decisions. And then obviously the standard of playing, the better players obviously know what and potentially what they can get away with and what they can't get away with within the laws of the game.
And coming, obviously, you're kind of the anomaly to most of the Premiership refs, given the fact that you actually played rugby at that kind of level. Obviously, is now refereeing against those that you used to play with, giving you a little bit more of a appreciation for how referees are and what they have to go through and what they have to keep an eye on?
Oh, I mean, I wasn't one of the best players, sort of with a relationship with the referee, being a scrum half, obviously.
Yeah.
You have that slight edge about you, and you try and referee the game yourself in that situation. But as soon as the first time I ever refereed, I think I refereed an under-16 game on a Sunday, and I literally had no idea where to stand. I was just running around, completely seeing the game at a different angle, different thought process. So I have a massive sort of admiration when I first moved into refereeing for referees and what they have to do and how hard their job is. And I think I would love more players, more supporters, not to necessarily like try and become a referee, but to actually give refereeing a go and just see how difficult it is and the amount of time you have to think about things and try and figure out what matters, what doesn't matter. Does the game need this? Does the game not need this? And it's so tough. And you've also got to, spend that time actually having a different mindset from playing, where you can get probably a little bit irate, a little bit emotional, a little bit, shouty. Whereas a referee, you've got to stay calm. It's all about, showing that you're calm, that perception that you're calm, and actually speaking when you speak to players, even if they are a little bit irate, maintaining your calmness and it's difficult. Coming through the levels, I learned it the hard way in one game, and the one game that I learned it from, I've never made that mistake ever again, and it taught me a lot. So no, I have a massive admiration for what it takes to become a referee and how these guys deal with things on a regular occasion.
Yeah, so you mentioned you'd like to see a lot more players transitioning into going into being a referee. What is the process involved with that transition? Do you get part on a fast track because you played the game? or do you still have to go through all the levels everyone else, regular non-playing person would?
So like everybody, we all have to do a referee course, which is basically a basic course anybody can do to learn the laws of rugby. Normally it's a 2-day weekend where you do some practical stuff and some classroom stuff, learning the laws and looking at different situations. With playing the game and obviously been with it for like 13, 14 years, I kind of did the course in a little bit quicker time because obviously some of the practical stuff I wasn't needed to do. And then as soon as you've done it, that's it. You're ready to go out there and referee. And what it comes down to is, I probably got fast-tracked a little bit quicker than most normal people would, purely because of what I'd done in the past with playing. But ultimately, you're assessed at every single level, like every level from level the bottom up to the top, which is level 1. You're getting assessed constantly. So you need to be challenged. So you might referee, say, at level 6, and you're doing quite well. So then you might get a level 5 game. You go up to level 5 again, you're assessed. Yeah, you kind of got that transition, but we'll keep you at level 6 for a little bit longer, and then maybe next season we can move you up. But I was very fortunate that I was moved up through the levels pretty quickly and pushed pretty hard within. I started refereeing 2 years before I retired, so I'd referee a few games before I even retired from playing. And I'd encourage any player now to try to take it up and give it a go, because ultimately you're never going to know if you enjoy it or not until you try something, and that's with anything.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, I lost it.
Yeah, Karl, sorry, I had to charge it. Put the charger in.
No worries. So obviously, you go from playing to referee, and you've got the experience, you've got the knowledge. For someone who doesn't have the playing experience you do, have you got any tips maybe for youngsters looking to get into the refereeing side of the game?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip is you just got to go out there and referee. Like, it doesn't matter what level it is, what game it is, if it's a team session at your local side or anything like that. I think you've got to go out and build that sort of mental knowledge of seeing pictures, breakdowns, scrums. Obviously, you can look at, the RFU, they do webinars, and there's stuff online where you can learn. You can watch referees talk about different situations. But ultimately, the biggest learning thing is actually in game, where you build up. You're going to make errors. You're going to make errors. I've made errors throughout my career, which has not been massive at this stage. But you make errors in games and stuff, and the only way you learn is by learning from their mistakes. And you just got to build that knowledge up, and by going out and actually refereeing games, contact sessions, team sessions. It's probably the biggest thing. So I'd say get out there as much as you can.
So obviously retired from professional rugby, got into refereeing. What was it like when you run out at Kingsholm for the first on your first ever Premiership game? Was it absolutely bricking it?
Well, it was quite surreal.
What was going through your head?
Because I'd only been a professional referee sort of 3 or 4 months, and I came into the professional referees. I thought, well, do you know what? Maybe I'll get a Premiership game towards the end of the season to sort of build me up, and then give me one at the end of the game, which might be sort of a dead rubber just to sort of go in there. And then I found out after like 4 months of being in there, they were like, yeah, we're going to give you a Premiership game. I was like, oh, okay, wow, fair enough.
Great.
Yeah, and then I was like, what game is it? And they were like, oh, Gloucester Saracens at Kingsholm. And obviously from playing at Kingsholm, I know the environment it's quite intimidating. They're quite a unique crowd down there, and they certainly let you know what they think. So when I went down there, like when I first started playing, I'd obviously get a few nerves here and there, and then towards the end of the career, you're kind of quite not as nervous. And then I remember running out there to warm up, thinking, oh my God, like the crowd were all screaming and shouting and giving me a little bit of grief, and I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be interesting. But ultimately, as soon as it's quite weird, even running out to blow the whistle before the start of the game, I was so nervous, like as in almost like a stomachache. I was so nervous about the whole game. Then as soon as I blew the whistle, I kind of just went into sort of playing referee mode and went, okay, it's time to sort of do this. And in that game, I made tons of errors, tons of errors. And even when I'd made the error, instantly as soon as I made the error in my head, I was like, "Yep, I've got that wrong." But then just tried moving on, because ultimately you've got to try and move on and look like you haven't made error, even though people might have recognised it. Some people might not even have known it. But it was a great experience, but very nerve-wracking experience before the actual game.
Yeah.
So did you think then, once you'd done that game, you were then destined to go on to the World Cup and get a few games out there? How did that?
Oh, I mean,
how did that feel? Because I obviously got you on social media and stuff, and some of the pictures you're posting, the stadiums are just fantastic.
I mean, from retiring, I didn't even contemplate being at the World Cup in 2 years from retiring. So to be selected was, a massive privilege. I'd gone to the Junior World Cup in my first year. That was in France, and that was a great experience just doing that. Moving on to the next stage, and then obviously involved in ARing in the Six Nations and the November Internationals, and was lucky enough to referee a couple of Tier 2 internationals, which was again just I refereed the New Zealand Maori versus USA at Soldier Field, which is
Chicago,
which is as an NFL fan myself, was just unbelievable. So, and then obviously to get the message that I was going to the World Cup, I was just like gobsmacked, and felt massively privileged to go to spend a time with some of the best referees in the world, and also go to a country which I'd never been to, and from being there for 6 weeks, I can honestly say it's one of the the best experiences of my life. The people there are unbelievable. The atmosphere created by the guys over there was amazing, and I think apart from a couple of glitches with obviously the typhoon, probably one of the most memorable World Cups in history. So yeah, I mean as I said, you saw some of the pictures from being out there. Every stadium was packed, no matter who was playing. It could have been Uruguay versus South Africa. Everybody just wanted to go out there, enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
Everybody supporting everybody, and it was and I was lucky enough to go and watch a few games as a fan as well, and be involved in that sort of atmosphere in the villages outside was incredible. So yeah, I mean, I don't think words can describe like how good it was out there, and culturally how they embraced everybody from around the world.
That's great. So how many games was it you did out there? Was it 3 or 4?
So I was involved in 6 as an AR and 1 as a number 4 in one of the quarterfinals. So, and some pretty good games out there. I mean, Australia, Fiji being on the line was one of the best games I feel of the World Cup. It had everything.
Yeah.
It had 7 TMO calls, which normally when you go to a TMO, it's like, oh, here we go again. They're using the TMO, but every call was close, and it was a fabulous game.
Basically on Headhunter watch. It's like, was that high? Probably. Let's go check.
Yeah, but and it wasn't more like any high tackles. It was more just tries. Scoring the corner, people diving in, and what's happened here and there. And it was a fantastic game of rugby. And I think even if you're not a rugby fan, to watch something like that, I think you'd appreciate it.
So what were you doing in your downtime when you were over there?
That's a good question. Obviously,
things of like you and Wayne Barnes out on the absolute line.
Well, obviously we experienced the cultural side of things. So which was going to sort of temples and sightseeing and visiting different cities, which was fantastic. We had some of our downtime where we went and watched a robot show, which was it's called the Robot Cafe. It's in Shinjuku. I only could describe it as just crazy. I mean, it felt like you were going from being in a rave to a house session to I don't really know, but again, a unique experience. And you'd say only in Japan. We went to a pet cafe where you have owls and dogs and cats and all sorts you can hold while having your coffee.
Oh, we've got a cat version up here.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we didn't really experience them, but and then obviously the sights and sounds of Roppongi, which is the sort of nightlife district, which was I mean, I won't go and delve into too much detail, but we had spent many a night there enjoying ourselves, and then we were during the typhoon kind of had to fly back up from down the South Island. It's only a couple of hours flight back up to our base camp in Tokyo, to find out 12 hours later I was getting a 9-hour train journey back down to the South Island, because obviously all flights have been cancelled due to typhoon. So me and a couple of the referees had a very fun journey down on the bullet train for 9 hours.
Trains, yeah.
With a few drinks.
Oh, fair play.
But we had a massive amount of downtime, which was great, and a few great team building exercises as well.
Oh, that sounds good. Like I say, the social media activity looks pretty great. So, just going back to semi-current rugby chat, Newcastle obviously coming up. Would you rate their chances at staying up next season?
I think, like you've seen in the Premiership, even over the last couple of years, I think it's turned into one of the most competitive and closest leagues in the world. I mean, every team's kind of beating everybody. I think this year it would have been really exciting to see. Obviously the season was completed and Saracens weren't, in
trouble.
I think it would have been really interesting to see how the league progressed and how close I think it would have been. So I think Newcastle coming up, I think, will just add to that. Obviously, depends on what recruitment happens and how that goes. But you've seen London Irish come up this year from the Championship, and they've competed really, really well. So I imagine Newcastle will follow suit. And again, if we don't complete this season, we start again next year, I think again it will be a really, really closely thought season. And I think anybody can beat anybody in their day, and it will just be a fantastic season to look forward to.
I think Leicester's breathed a sigh of relief. Obviously, it's sad to see what happened to Saracens, but I think they were like, oh, okay. I think they were destined for some iffy times.
I agree, and it's one of them where I think it sort of turned the league into sort of a situation where you potentially could try out a few other players because there was no pressure on going down, but then also you're still fighting for European places and top 4 places. So I think you're still there to win games. Supporters come there to see you win games. So you're judged on winning games. So I think every team, no matter what, would still want it to win. So I think it still would have been a very interesting season.
I think obviously with Saracens going down and them pipping majority of their international players to be staying, can you see the Saracens games being refereed a little bit harsher, differently than the other games in the Championship, or do you think it's going to be kind of spread across the board? Is going to be okay?
Like anything, all we do is in refereeing, we're looking for that consistency. I don't go into one game looking at something different. If I'm refereeing first versus 56th, I referee the game, what's in front of me. And I think any referee wouldn't go into a game and go, I'm going to referee this differently because I'm refereeing this team or that team. So I don't see any difference from the Championship referees to the Premiership referees when they referee down at that level, refereeing Saracens any different to they'd referee any other team. For me, the biggest thing would be interesting to see is how Saracens perform in that league regarding how they approach it, I think.
Yeah, do you think they'll play a lot of their players, or do you think these boys are destined for some good time off and they'll get nice and fresh?
I think depending on what happens with obviously the Championship, and there's obviously the Championship Cup and other things like that, I think the guys who stay, particularly sort of the seasoned internationals and the senior players, will probably get well rested. You've seen over the past years with London Irish, Newcastle and teams like that, it's an opportunity to rest some of these guys who normally play 20 to 30 games a year and sort of get the body sort of back to where it probably was a few years ago. So we'll see what happens. You never know what will happen until the season starts.
But does that pose a potential issue of rustiness when they go into international camp, given less game time, is a little bit complacency in there going, well, you've not played that much, you're coming in and playing anyways, and a little bit of turmoil within the camps? I
don't think so. I think if you look at some of the other international teams, you look at Ireland, particularly the Southern Hemisphere, all their players are centrally contracted. So if you take Ireland, for example, when you see during the Six Nations and November internationals, you'll see when they'll play in their international teams, but when they go within the games around to the Pro 14, they might not play some of the Pro 14 games. So they'll play in the European games because that's massive for them. But then when it comes back to the Pro 14, you see a lot rested. So, I could see a similar sort of thing like that with Saracens. They'll play in the games they need them to play, but ultimately they need rest as well. And if you look at Ireland, it's not really affected them too much with essentially contracted and certain players being rested.
Yeah, just before we actually started recording, I think JK was on the call as well. We had a little rumour, I don't know where it's come from, about potentially Jackson Ray buying the TV rights for the championship. Is that something you've heard
Jackson
of?
Ray, you mean the number 8 for Saracens, or do you mean Nigel Ray?
Oh, Nigel Ray, my bad.
Jackson Ray would have to do.
Yeah.
That would be fair. The TV rights to Jackson Ray, that would be quite common. I'd love to watch.
Oh, my bad.
Very halftime shows going on, I think.
Yeah. Nigel, do you know what? I've not heard of this rumour. That rumours spread very quickly, and there's always a number of rumours going around. And until I see it come out and I hear it from people who are up the top, then I'll tend to believe it. But I've not heard anything rumored like that. And if he does do that, fair play to him.
So, full swing back to refereeing. How tempting has it been to just bin Danny Kerr on a constant basis?
Well, I've only refereed Quins once in a pre-season friendly. I've never done them in a competitive game, purely for reasons that I have obviously still a few guys I used to play with sit at these teams. I just think it would be not necessarily a conflict of interest, or I'd referee the game differently. It's just some of my friends and have a situation where I've got to potentially have a stern word or bin them. Probably,
harder.
Would be a little bit harder for me. So I choose just to sort of leave it at the moment and wait until some of these guys maybe move on, and then I'll start refereeing Quins.
Fair. So, out of all the games you refereed, what's the best one you've ever done? As in, everything's gone smoothly. Not necessarily the best play, but would you say your best performance that you've enjoyed the most?
Do you know what? I don't think I'd ever sort of sit there and go, that was my best performance or that was my worst performance. Just purely because every game is completely different. And, I could ask you if you thought if I refereed well, and you might say yes. And I could ask another person, do you think I refereed well? And they'd be like, absolutely not, the worst referee going. So I think it's all perception based with refereeing. I think probably like one of the, most enjoyable games that I referee I'd probably say just this season was I did sort of Toulouse, Connacht in the Champions Cup. And whenever you go to France, the atmosphere is just unbelievable. And I think most of the enjoyable games you referee, or even AR or whatever, are the ones which have the sort of best atmospheres. Going down to Wales for their Grand Slam last year, went down there, even though it was raining. I mean, the atmosphere in there is electric, especially when they have the roof closed. So I probably couldn't pick like a sort of specific game which has been amazing. But, you look at games which the atmospheres have been incredible, like, in the World Cup, the, New Zealand South Africa game, that Wales game I mentioned, domestically, even when you go to places like Leicester, Northampton, the crowds are just fantastic. And, when you go out there and you hear that noise, it makes it just such an enjoyable occasion.
Yeah. And obviously going from, before you were used to a team culture, and obviously now you're refereeing, it's kind of slightly different. Is there a same culture within the referees and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly the same. You're as a player, you're with your team, 5 days a week during the season. And you build up that sort of team camaraderie and stuff. Whereas as referees, we sort of meet up once or twice a week during the season, and then during the off season, everyone lives, up north, down south, down Exeter, so it's a little bit different. Whereas obviously when you're playing, most of the players live within sort of a 15-20 minute radius, so you can kind of catch up with guys outside of rugby as well as when you're at work. So there still is that team sort of session. We train together at Twickenham. We have meetings together. We have socials outside of it. Obviously, we spend time during match days with guys outside of our group, like our group of sort of 14 assistant referees and referees at Twickenham. So there is still that team sort of bonding camaraderie, but it's just slightly different to playing.
No, definitely. So last thing we'll come on to, as we don't want to keep you too long. Obviously, rugby's off for now. Any tips or small training drills you can give to any players stuck at home in the,
You're asking Karl for small. Jesus Christ.
The thing is, I think this time of year, particularly with rugby off, I've had a few people ask me about a number of things like, how would you structure your season? What would you do now? I think at this moment in time, rest is a massive. I think people underestimate how important it is to just rest. Actually, not necessarily rest your body, but mentally just switch off from rugby. Go and find something else to do. If we're realistic, the rugby season is probably not going to start till minimum August. So you're not going to be out training in that sort of environment till maybe July, August time. So I'd almost take 2 or 3, maybe even 4 weeks just to rest, recover. And if you feel like you can't do that, then just work on your basic skills. There's, Ram rugby, for example, do that solo passing ball. You can take a ball out into the back garden. As a 9, you can practice your passing, general skills, passing, kicking, catching. There's so many drills online on Instagram with working on, your catching, reactions, not necessarily with rugby balls, with tennis balls. You look at Crazy Cats, they have nets where you can practice your hand-eye coordination. I just think be creative. If you do need to practice, just try and find different ways, not just always with a rugby ball, but work on them fundamental skills. I don't want you like in your back gardens trying to smash your brother, doing tackling drills or anything like that, but just try and work on them fundamentals. And, as now you can still go out of one bit of exercise. So you can still work on your fitness and train like that. But, I'd almost say at this point in time, just mentally and physically, just give yourself a little bit of a rest.
Yeah, and obviously it's good for the mental health side of things. I know I noticed on one of your Twitter posts, tweets, one of the two. Obviously you're an advocate for mental health, given you one of the nominations you took. And obviously, what would you say to those rugby players about their mental health, especially now more than ever?
I think due to obviously where we are in the world, and we're at these lockdown sort of situations, and this has never happened before. So everybody, players, and that's not just rugby players, it's players from all sporting backgrounds and jobs and all that stuff, are gonna feel alone and potentially a little bit depressed at this time. And the rest of it, I just think the biggest thing is people are there for you to talk to. Reach out to people, former players, former colleagues in your job, friends, family, and the best thing is to talk to people, express how you're feeling. And there's always ways around it. We're very lucky in this day and age with the technology we have, FaceTime, Skype, all these sort of things. House party now even. You can stay in contact with people, and I think the best thing is to talk to people, but also keep your mind busy, switch off to things, find new hobbies, and just try and keep yourself busy, because obviously not being able to leave the house as much as you probably want to and see people, it's the only way to get around these things. But I just think that probably the key message is there's always someone to talk to, always someone willing to listen. So just don't be afraid to ask.
Perfect. I think on that note, we'll we'll call that it. Thank you very much for your time this evening, Karl.
No problem.
And hope to see you back out on the pitch soon.
Hopefully, and thanks for having me, guys. Enjoy.
No worries. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Bye-bye.